Adams Archive.
Canadian doctors just admitted that the COVID vaccine left a woman paralyzed. Now, that's not something new. We've heard of this before, but what we haven't heard of is the solution that they posed for her, which was the fact that they offered her, in order to make up for it, to be euthanized. Like a dog, like a sick dog. Oh, we're so sorry that we got you sick, ma'am. We're so sorry you cannot move your body. And in order to help you through this situation, how about we just end your life? That was their solution. Not exactly the type of news you're hoping for from the medical community. Now, here's the article. This comes from the Liberty Daily, and it was posted February 23rd of 2024. So just a couple months ago. But it is now gaining traction. And it says, I'll readily admit to being one of the arrogant, even somewhat ignorant Americans that non-Americans hate. The kind that couldn't give less of a crap about what happens in other countries unless it directly relates to America. But every now and then I like to see what's going on with our Anglosphere cousins, Australia, Britain, Canada, and New Zealand. Okay, let's move on from that. It says exclusive, young Ontario woman's life becomes a living hell after Moderna booster shot leaves her paralyzed. Doctors confirm the vaccine connection and offer medical assistance in dying, otherwise known as MAID. Kayla Pollock is a 37-year-old mother from Ontario whose life took a drastic turn after receiving a Moderna COVID booster shot. She experienced paralysis from the neck down and has been enduring a challenging ordeal ever since. Kayla's early years were marked by an unspeakable cruelty and suffering. As an infant, she endured the horrors of severe abuse, broken bones, cigarette burns, and bruises inflicted upon her helpless body by her parents. Wow, that's terrible. Her distressing situation prompted the intervention of Family and Child Services, ultimately leading to her placement into a caring, loving, and supportive home. All right, we don't need this whole woman's background, but they tell you that she likes gardening, she's healthy, very cool. When the pandemic struck, Kayla recalls the mainstream media, politicians, and public health officials emphasizing the severity of the virus and urging everyone to get vaccinated. She remembers health officials specifically advising that those with high risk should prioritize getting vaccinated. Being immunocompromised and type 1 diabetic, Kayla heeded the advice of health officials and received the first 2 Pfizer shots in the middle of 2021 and didn't experience any issues. Okay. Then what? Well, it says Kayla then decided to take a booster, but this time it was the Moderna booster shot. She recounts going to the vaccination drive and the police being there. She found that odd and questioned why the police were present. According to Kayla, people were upset that Moderna was being given out instead of Pfizer, and that was the reason for the police presence. Kayla says that something did not sit right in her gut, but she went ahead with the Moderna booster anyways. Okay. She got her booster shot on January 11th of 2022. Now, 4 days later, Kayla described a situation where her legs just gave out and she collapsed. But all seemed fine the short time later. Then 9 days later, she experienced a similar event, and at that time, she called her doctor asking to see a neurologist because she suspected something wasn't right. Well, as she woke, says Kayla's life took an irreversible turn on February 22nd. So she got it January 11th, February 22nd. She couldn't move her body. While in the emergency department, Kayla recounts that the attending physician initially dismissed her symptoms, suggesting that it was all in her head and portrayed her as a crazy person, and ordered a psychiatric consult. All of what Kayla describes happening is evident in her medical records, which we obtained and reviewed. Eventually, an MRI was conducted and revealing that Kayla had a very large lesion in her spinal cord. Wow. A neurologist followed up with Kayla and recommended a course of steroids in an attempt to decrease the size. Okay. Now, she asked if the lesion could be a tumor. In an audio recording taken by Kayla's boyfriend, the neurologist responds saying it's less likely a tumor and that it is a gut impression it was his gut impression that was caused by the vaccine. When Kayla questions the doctor as to whether many people have had something similar, the doctor responds saying many people have had it. Now, later, Kayla would learn that she had developed transverse myelitis. Wow, a condition that interrupts the transmission of messages along the spinal cord nerves throughout the body. She would go on to spend several months in the hospital where she says she was offered medical assistance in dying on 2 occasions, but rejected the offer. Jeez. Imagine that. Let's see. Oh, they do have a video here. So I guess we'll go ahead and watch that video. Imagine that. You find out that you are paralyzed by the pharmaceutical company. And now, for them to reward you for everything they did to you, they're going to kill you as a result. Like I said, this sounds like something that you would do to a dog. Oh, your dog's sick? Just euthanize it. You can buy another one. That's how they look at humans. You're dispensable, you're disposable. Especially in the medical industry, they see people die every single day. They don't know about your children. They don't know about your husband. They don't know about all of the people and friends in your life that love you and care for you. And instead, they want to cover up their actions by offering to you to end your life because they messed up. We're sorry. Let's go ahead and watch this video.
Kayla Pollock had many challenges in her early years growing up in rural Ontario. She would endure unspeakable abuse at the hands of her biological parents as an infant. But with the love and support of her
a mom,
Here we go.
lifestyle at home as well, and I was also really active. I trained service dogs and guide dogs, and did a lot of hiking, and of course, first and foremost, I was a mom. So I ended up quitting with all the big animals for safety reasons, and I ended up working at my son's school. So for the past 4 years before this happened, I had been working at my son's school as a casual EA.
Could you tell us why you decided to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
One of the reasons I got the COVID-19 vaccine originally, and it was quite a debate about what we do. I basically, a lot of it had to do with the things I was hearing on TV. So there was a lot of fear just being screamed at me by not just the TV, but also when you hear the WHO is on TV telling you that this is like a deadly pandemic, and people with immune disorders are gonna die from COVID-19 more likely than other people. I was hearing about that, and my dad was dying in long-term care at the time. In order to go see him, I needed the shots. In order to go to work, I needed the shots. So I received 2 Pfizers and then a Moderna. I had no issues with the first 2 vaccines, which were the Pfizers, and it wasn't until the Moderna shot, the booster, that I began having problems.
A week after receiving her third mRNA COVID-19 vaccine in January.
Now, when you look at this video, she's sitting in kind of a smallish house. I would expect that she would be in a mansion after this, that the pharmaceutical companies, Moderna, would have paid her out millions upon millions of dollars for the ruined life that she now has to live, where she cannot move any of her lower limbs. She can't walk. She can't chase after her kids. She can't run. She can't hike. She can't do any of those things. And that's because the mass media was weaponized and manipulated against you to force you to get a pharmaceutical drug that was untested for profit. Right? And then she mentioned another thing there, which hits home to me and a lot of you guys, I'm assuming as well, which is the fact that you weren't able to go see your loved ones. If you had somebody dying in your family, which we did, you were not allowed to go see them. In some cases, even if you were vaccinated, right? But they would hold that over your head, right? Towards the mid to end-ish time, they kept pushing harder and harder and harder. Now you see they suddenly just pulled off completely, right? Saying you probably don't even need the booster, right? But you weren't allowed to see your family as they were dying. Your grandma, you weren't allowed to see her as she died. Your mother, your brother, your father. Also, they could weaponize the pharmaceutical industry against you.
January of 2022, Kayla fell to the floor, paralyzed for 30 minutes, unable to move her legs. A second episode occurred.
So that was some sort of psychotic episode when they're upset, and that this was in my head. And the good news was that I would get better because I was essentially having an episode that was,
and they showed her medical
psychotic
records
episode
just now,
and that I'd never had any history of anything like that before. But he was telling me this, so I thought this was wonderful news. I asked him when I would get better, and he said, it's up to you, really. I'm going to have the psychiatrist come and see you. So we ordered a psych consult, and he left me there. They left me there for the entire day. So originally that was the first diagnosis. The second diagnosis,
You're crazy.
A doctor
It's not our fault.
and he whispered in my ear and he said, I think there's something seriously wrong with you. The second diagnosis, a doctor came to me and he whispered in my ear and he said, I think there's something seriously wrong with you. I do not think you're faking. And he said, I have a neurologist or a radiologist who's willing to read your report at home. If you go into the scanner right now, I can get that done. And I said, absolutely, because I don't think I'm crazy either. There's something really wrong with me. I am not faking this. And so I had the MRI scan. The radiologist read the report, and they found a massive lesion on my spine that went basically right from the tailbone of my spine up, and it was just like half an inch away from my breathing. Had I received the MRI first, I could be walking today because the treatment is very time specific, and it wasn't until the next day that I even saw the neurologist who looked at my MRI and told me that I had transverse myelitis. I was starting to suspect this was vaccine related, and so when my boyfriend arrived at the hospital, anytime a doctor came in, I told him to record everything because I knew that this made sense. This had started right after my vaccines. It made sense with the paralysis in my legs. It made sense with the diagnosis. They had to rule out MS, they had to rule out cancer, they had to rule out infection. And that's when the doctor told me that he was sure that this was caused by the vaccine, and he'd seen many, many different vaccine injuries that were just like mine.
Here's the audio recording of them speaking to the neurologist about the case of her injury.
A tumor that has to be removed.
Less likely, right? Less likely tumor.
Okay.
Right, less likely.
What's a cancer workup mean?
Well, we use CT, chest, abdomen, pelvis, just to make sure there's no other areas of malignancy.
Okay.
So that's what that is. But most likely it's going to be probably, if I'm using my gut impression here, from the vaccine.
So other people have had it though?
Many people have had
Many?
Many.
Wow. So it says in 2 of her medical reports, it mentions her transverse myelitis is caused by the vaccine, and then they show it. Caused by following 3rd dose. Wow.
Ending her life. Kayla would spend the next several months in the hospital and rehabilitation center. According to Kayla, staff counselors at South Lake Hospital offered medical assistance in dying on 2 separate occasions as an option to ending her life. Kayla considered it, but declined after some consideration. Kayla describes some of the challenges she faces on a daily basis.
As far as my condition today, I have no feeling in my hands, so I can't tell if something's hot or cold. So not allowed to use the oven or the stove because I have burnt myself. I have no feeling on the back of my arms. I have no triceps, which is the muscle that you need. Like a paraplegic, for instance, someone in a wheelchair, you often see them pushing their self up out of their wheelchair and transferring somewhere else. I don't have the ability to do that. Rehab didn't do, and
Let's see if
to
we can
deal
get
with
to
that.
anything
But
else about the
I have
medical
no
assistance
bowel or
for
bladder
dying.
function. Paralyzed.
Now I want you...
So that's the first thing. And then I realize I'm alone and that I can't move and there's nothing I can do about it. I can't reach my meds. I can't get the things I need. Because in that case, there's nobody to come and help me.
After another organization advocated for Kayla, she eventually received a total of 10 hours. It is important to note that Kayla lives alone and cannot dress herself or get out of bed without this support.
Jeez.
The Canadian Independent reached out to the HCCSS, but they declined to comment. Kayla applied a second time to the Vaccine Injury Support Program as her first application, according to the program staff, was never received. Kayla was only recently assigned a caseworker, almost 2 years from the date she was hospitalized.
Now, I want you to imagine that that's not some random person on the internet. I want you to imagine that that is your daughter that thought that she was doing something in the best interest of her family, in the best interest of herself and those around her, because she was told so by figures of authority. So she went and she did it. Then she became paralyzed due to that empathetic reaction. And then they had the nerve to go to your own daughter and say, hey, we know that this is probably from the vaccine. We also know that your life is probably terrible right now. We also know that we're not going to do anything about this. So, hey, if you want to die, I'll kill you. And we can call it medically assisted death. That's infuriating. That's a human, right? Could be somebody's mom. That could be somebody's sister, right? I want to harp on that a little bit because it's so easy in today's world of videos and constant streams of social media to like remove yourself from the person, remove yourself from the conversation of like, that could be somebody that I know.
Adam's Archive.